Part 63. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 624. It turned out that this radio message was just a routine congratulation. To put it bluntly, it was just a matter of face and words. When General Lee Wiki, who was still enjoying himself, heard this, he suddenly remembered the situation where the Allied forces refused to send troops because they thought it was dangerous, and he couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. However, after all, the battle was over, and Wang Ling led his team to a complete victory, so the irritation faded a bit. Of course, sarcasm is inevitable. Thank you General Reagan for the compliment. Facts have proved that with Wang Ling's ability, it is not impossible to deal with Yuri base alone. Of course, I still believe that if your army also sends troops together, the attack plan will be better, it will be smoother. In this attack plan, the Allies did not actually send troops, but they did send intruder fighter planes to continuously harass, and even rescued Huban by accident. For this reason, Wang Ling has decided not to argue with the Allies about the Allies' refusal to send troops this time. Of course, this was just his own idea. General Lee Wiki didn't know that Huban was in that anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. The words on the radio were ridiculing the Allies for not sending troops. General Reagan is also a veteran, how could he not understand this? However, after all, they did not really send troops, and General Reagan could not directly refute anything, but he did not lose face, and responded, "General Lee, don't be upset, of course we have our own considerations. Without our help, Wang Ling, didn't they also successfully conquer Yuri base? Of course, General Lee doesn't need to take it too seriously. The remote-controlled tank that our allies have accelerated the development of has entered the final testing stage. I believe that when we attack Yuri base on the top of the mountain, it will be a big success." Brilliant. Really? Let's wait and see. General Lee Wiki did have some expectations, but after seeing Wang Ling's combat effectiveness, he was more disdainful in comparison. The call ended here, and after the interruption, the two old generals cursed in unison, "Huh, old guy." At the Allied base command post, General Reagan could not curse in person, but after the communication was interrupted, he was rude. "What the hell? Isn't it just relying on Wang Ling? Without Wang Ling, do you think your coalition forces can successfully conquer you? Are you in the base? Humph, you didn't even make any achievements with the Kirov airship, why are you so awesome?" A deputy beside him also nodded matter-of-factly, "Indeed, when the coalition attacked Yuri base, they actually didn't have the advantage as we did. They mainly relied on Wang Ling's firepower." Wang Ling. Wang Ling. Damn it, why is this guy so strong? General Reagan asked in annoyance. Another deputy asked, "But General, Wang Ling has become stronger. The one who has a headache should be Yuri base. Why are you so anxious?" Snort. General Reagan replied, "Wang Ling's firepower can not only suppress Yuri's troops, but also most of our allied forces. The stronger this guy is, the greater the threat to us. I'm afraid that he will always be able to suppress us in the future. One day, we will fail because of Wang Ling. That's it? General, I'm afraid we are not the only ones who realize that Wang Ling is a threat. Look at the electronic video. The Yuri base on the top of the mountain has also sent more than 10 laser UFOs. It is probably too late for rescue. Most of them are went with Wang Ling." Just when General Reagan was angry, the deputy suddenly reminded him. General Reagan looked at the electronic video and found that more than a dozen laser UFOs were actively approaching. He couldn't help but gloated, "If all the dozen laser UFOs attack Wang Ling, do you think he can still survive? No matter how strong Wang Ling is, he is still a human being. If he is set on fire, he probably won't survive. However, Wang Ling is already famous for being difficult to deal with. Will he be stupid enough to let laser UFO set on fire? Let's see. Get ready, The enemy is approaching, more than 10 laser UFOs. As usual, top the Apocalypse tank. Of course, Wang Ling also observed the electronic videos passed by the dozen or so laser UFOs dispatched from the Yuri base on the top of the mountain. However, the authorities were obsessed with it. Being on the front line battlefield, Wang Ling never thought that the target of these laser UFOs was himself. The temporary deployment was still the same as before. This is the original site of Yuri's base halfway up the mountain. If you want to go down the mountain, there are 18 bends in the mountain road. It is not easy to forcefully go down the mountain with the laser UFO pursuit. It is better to kill these enemies directly here. Under his order, all the Apocalypse tanks moved to the front, keeping a considerable distance from other tanks and infantry in order to attract the laser UFO's firepower. The next step was to wait. The mountain road is difficult to walk, but the Air Force can ignore the terrain and travel freely and quickly. Not long after the Apocalypse tanks were in place, the batch of laser UFOs had already flown over. After breaking into the air defense range of the Apocalypse tanks, all the Apocalypse tanks together he opened fire and launched missiles one after another, hitting a laser UFO at the front. According to the inertia of the Red Alert World Army, when the march is disrupted, it will change the target and attack the disruptor first. Wang Ling relied on this enemy's characteristics to overwhelm Yuri's base twice in succession. Laser UFO. But this time, it seemed to be different. These laser UFOs seemed to have a death order. They were bombarded by the Apocalypse tanks, but they refused to stop at all. They did not even emit a single laser beam and were still sailing. They are here. When he first saw the enemy's actions, Wang Ling was a little confused for a while, but after being on the battlefield for so long, Wang Ling was also very sensitive to the war in his heart. After being confused for a long time, he suddenly woke up. Damn, he must be coming for me. Attention all infantry, get on the car and retreat quickly. That's right, after realizing the enemy's goal, Wang Ling had no idea of confronting him head-on. The first thing he thought of was to escape. As a deputy at the Allied command post said, no matter how strong Wang Ling is, he is still a human being. In this Red Alert world, ordinary tanks without levels can only do limited damage to infantry. One infantryman can hold off a tank for a period of time. But the laser UFO is not good. The damage caused by the laser beam of this thing to the infantry is very considerable. Wang Ling has no confidence that he can withstand the fire of more than 10 laser UFOs. That is simply asking for death. Under his order, a group of conscripts took action quickly and entered the air defense tracked vehicles very quickly. After the 5 air defense tracked vehicles were filled with people, they immediately began to flee, following the mountain road they came from, letting go of their speed, and running like crazy. There was no need to wait any longer for other tanks. As for those laser UFOs, they were originally ordered to kill Wang Ling by force, but the target suddenly escaped, which made them quite depressed. However, the order has not changed yet, and they did not care about anything else. They could only pursue them from behind. The other Apocalypse tanks, Rhino tanks, and Phantom tanks had become mere foils at this time, and could only retreat one after another under Wang Ling's temporary order. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 625. A funny scene just happened. All the mobilization soldiers of the attack team headed by Wang Ling got on the vehicle and drove away in advance. A group of laser UFOs were chasing behind them. After that, the Phantom tanks and Rhino tanks were also chasing with all their might. At first glance, they seemed to be chasing. Running behind the laser UFO. At the end, there are those Apocalypse tanks. They are huge and terrifying, but their mobility is too poor. At this time, they are far behind. These major types of arms, arranged without distinction between friend and foe, are like a greedy snake with its joints cut off, which is a bit funny. Of course, underneath this comedy, there is endless hostility and murderous intent, especially in the first two sections, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and the laser UFO. After all, the target of the laser UFO is Wang Ling. We can't let Wang Ling run away like this. We can only pursue them head-on. Although they are air forces, in fact, their marching speed is not as fast as that of anti-aircraft crawlers. On this straight mountain road, the distance is getting farther and farther. However, it is the Air Force after all, and it has an advantage on this mountain road. The anti-aircraft crawler vehicle in front quickly arrived at the corner, and after turning it entered the next stage of the mountain road, but the laser UFO directly ignored this corner and intercepted it halfway. Who flew directly from the upper mountain road to the lower mountain road, encountered a group of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, and then fought. However, just one or two laser beams caused the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle to run away again, and they could only continue to chase after it. This scene was repeated frequently in the following period, and from time to time one or two laser beams would be emitted. However, no matter how low the armor and health of the anti-aircraft crawlers are, they cannot be destroyed by just one or two laser beams. Moreover, during the rapid march, the order of the anti-aircraft crawlers also changed several times, and Wang was not the only one who was attacked. Ling's car, evenly distributed the damage, was not enough to destroy any anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. Not only that, although the mountain road is winding, the laser UFO was still chasing the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. It failed to fully utilize the advantages of the Air Force. It chased for too long on the level mountain road in vain. In the end, after chasing for a long time, those anti-aircraft crawler vehicles instead, the car pulled farther and farther away from them. It was not an option to pursue them like this. The commander of the Yuri base on the top of the mountain was not too rigid. He changed his orders at the last minute. If he couldn't catch up with Wang Ling, he would use the tanks behind him to discourage him. Under this command, a group of laser UFOs stopped hastily and began to fly back. Not long after, they bumped into the phantom tanks behind them. They concentrated their fire and killed one phantom tank in one round of bombardment. However, when they bullied the ground troops, the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles in front of them that were retreating quickly suddenly stopped, turned back temporarily, hid under a few sections of mountain road, and stopped. Then Wang Ling got out of the car. He transformed into an anti-aircraft infantryman, shouldered the barrel and violently bombarded those laser UFOs. The ground-to-air battle on the mountain road is quite special. The Air Force has a great advantage. During the pursuit, you can bombard them across the mountain roads. When retreating, you can also ignore the terrain and run away. But conversely, if the Air Force can attack from up and down the mountain road, then the Air Defense Force can of course also fight back, and usually the air defense range of the Air Defense Force is farther than the attack range of the Air Force, not to mention Wang Ling, a 10-star soldier king. Anti-aircraft infantry? Dong 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 dong. Dong 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 dong. From this angle and this position, only Wang Ling can successfully attack, but his firepower alone is comparable to the combined firepower of 5 to 6 elite anti-aircraft crawlers. Moreover, after escaping for so long before, he was still holding fire in his heart. Well, it's even more rude to fight now. As a result, under his series of bombardments, 3 of the laser UFOs were quickly knocked down, and 2 of them lost half of their health due to splash damage from the anti-aircraft infantry. The original target of these laser UFOs was Wang Ling, but because they couldn't catch up, they temporarily changed their orders and vented their anger on the tanks behind them. But now, when they were bombarding the ground tanks, Wang Ling was back and dared to fight back. Would they be happy? As a result, the order changed again, and the remaining laser UFOs continued to change directions and chased Wang Ling. However, Wang Ling did not confront them head-on. Instead, he turned around and got into the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. The entire convoy continued to retreat at the fastest speed. The last time we retreated, because it was in a hurry, there were always some laser UFOs who took the opportunity to fire a few laser beams during the process. But now we are separated by such a long distance that even the Air Force tracking on the mountain road could not catch up for a while. If he couldn't catch them, the distance would get further and further away. Even a batch of laser UFOs couldn't shoot out any more laser beams. Seeing that it was impossible to catch up, the Yuri base commander could only change his order again and shoot the tanks in the rear. However, when the laser UFO returned and bullied the ground troops, the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles in front also stopped, followed them back, and hit on a high and low mountain road, bombarding them fiercely. Together with the 2 half-health ships last time, this round of bombardment killed 4 laser UFOs. Due to the splatter damage, there were even 3 half-health ships and 1 remaining health ship. The firepower of the King-level anti-aircraft infantry, are you kidding? The originally mighty Air Force team was tricked twice by Wang Ling, and more than half of it was lost directly. The remaining laser UFOs also became furious, and under orders, continued to pursue Wang Ling. At this time, Wang Ling also calmed down, and even started to gloat a little. He continued to turn around and get into the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, running wildly, as if he was playing a monkey. Having suffered 2 major losses in succession, these laser UFOs, or rather the commander of Yuri base, learned wisely and did not stop and attack the tanks in the rear alone. They just focused on chasing the anti-aircraft crawlers. These anti-aircraft tracked vehicles, or rather Wang Ling, are simply too annoying. It took a long time for the attacking team to climb the mountain road before, but after all, that was to take care of the speed of the Apocalypse tank. In fact, the mobility of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle did not need to take such a long time at all. After a chase and an escape, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle rushed out of the hilly area not long after, and then ran towards the holy city like flying. The batch of laser UFOs also rushed out of the hilly area, running towards the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles and gave chase. However, when the mountain road was rugged, relying on the Air Force's superiority, the laser UFO was unable to catch up with the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. It was even harder to catch up on the flat ground. The distance was getting wider and wider, and the laser UFO actually gave up the idea of pursuing further and stopped temporarily. After suffering heavy losses in the first 2 times, they did not turn back to attack the tanks in the rear. They just stopped in the air, feeling quite in a dilemma. However, after Wang Ling observed the movement of the laser UFO, he also temporarily ordered the suspension of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, and parked it there, fighting with them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 626. Wang Ling's idea is actually very simple. If the laser UFO doesn't move, he won't move either. Let's see who can outlast the other. If the laser UFO wants to chase him, he will run, and run into the Holy City Coalition base to see if you still dare to chase. If the laser UFO wants to turn around and attack the wolf if the tank in the follow-up group is about to retreat, he will catch up and fight. See if you can withstand a few more rounds of harassment from me. This whole guerrilla warfare style, and the intention is very obvious, and anyone with a discerning eye can see it at a glance. The result is that the commander of Yuri base was so disgusted that he became furious in the command post. Asshole, he is simply an asshole. If you have the guts, fight head on, running around like a loach. But he was amused by the sight of General Li Wiki in the command post of the coalition base. Wang Ling is a devilish guy. It would be unlucky for Yuri base to have such an opponent. In the command post of the Allied Forces base, General Reagan's expression was not very good. These laser UFOs are nothing to do with him. Not only can't they kill him, but they are being treated like a monkey. This Wang Ling is too difficult to deal with. Girl, you still want to target me? You are still young. In the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, Wang Ling was cursing while watching the electronic video. Although he had been treating the laser UFO like a monkey along the way, he was inevitably a little depressed after being chased for so long. The more depressed he became, the more he made up his mind. Not even one of the remaining laser UFOs could be spared, and they would all be killed. However, he was not confident that he could withstand concentrated fire attacks and kill this batch of laser UFOs, so he had to resort to guerrilla warfare. The group of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles was parked here, and now the competition was to see who could use up the energy first. Wang Ling has a lot of time. When he gets tired, he can go back to the real world to rest. He can't afford it. But those laser UFOs didn't seem to have much patience. After being fooled by Wang Ling for so long, the Yuri base commander didn't want to kill Wang Ling anymore. As a result, he ordered the laser UFOs to advance several times in succession, but every time they advanced, the anti-aircraft tracks the car ran away directly. As a result, after a lot of back and forth, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle had already reached the edge of the holy city. If they continued to chase, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle returned to the base, and Wang Ling was completely helpless. In desperation, these laser UFOs could only stop in the air, seemingly still waiting for the commander. Decision. While waiting, several of the faster Phantom tanks in the Wolf Group's attack team, as well as the Rhino tanks that followed at a distance, also arrived belatedly. However, after observing these two types of tank units, Wang Ling did not dare to let them come directly. Instead, he made a large circle around these laser UFOs alone, trying to run over from the side. But the laser UFO seems to have given up. All the remaining laser UFOs have a collective goal and want to stop them halfway. However, as soon as they moved, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles also took action and chased them from behind. After all, they had suffered two big losses. These remaining laser UFOs did not dare to make similar mistakes again. They stopped midway without giving Wang Ling a chance to make a sneak attack. As soon as they stopped, the anti-aircraft crawler also stopped and continued to use up. Of course, such a consumption method will not last forever. There are still a few Apocalypse tanks driving slowly behind in the attacking team. When the Apocalypse tanks arrive here, Wang Ling and the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles will be enough to instigate the enemy. Damn these laser UFOs. This is just Wang Ling's initial thought. In fact, with the speed of the Apocalypse tank, it will take some time to get here. During this time, the laser UFO doesn't know what else it can do. However, during this period, the coalition base was the first to lose its patience and simply sent more than 10 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles to support and respond. They passed through the Long Holy City area and joined the Wolf attack team. With this batch of air defense forces, it would be enough to forcibly attack the laser UFO. Wang Ling was too lazy to fight guerrillas. He simply commanded all the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, rushed forward, and fought head-on with the remaining laser UFOs. Field. During this period, Wang Ling simply did not get out of the car, so as not to be caught by the laser UFO and attack with fire. He just relied on the air defense efficiency of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and wiped out all the remaining ones at the cost of 3 of them being blown up. The laser UFO ended this funny chase. Boom. And as the last laser UFO was shot down, in the Yuri base command post on the top of the mountain, the anger that the commander had endured for a long time burst out, and he punched the control panel with a punch, and even the powerful mental power he couldn't control his release, which scared several deputies to the point of trembling. More than a dozen laser UFOs were unable to kill even one of his infantry. Who is this guy, and why is he such a bastard? Although the existence of Wang Ling has attracted Yuri's attention from the beginning, this attention was only focused on wanting to win over him. He did not know that this guy would pose a great threat to him in the future, so in addition to except for those who had contact with Wang Ling at the beginning, few of his commanders knew about Wang Ling. Now that the commander had witnessed Wang Ling's difficulty, he was furious, but at the same time, he was also very confused and afraid. A deputy beside him answered cautiously, "General, this man seems to be a hero-level unit of the coalition just like Master X. It is not surprising that he has such powerful firepower." But Commander Yuri snorted and said, "Can't I see it? It's because this guy has so much firepower that he is the nemesis of our troops, so I wanted to kill him in advance. But who knew this guy was so capable? Slippery, what a bastard. Now we are the only base left in the entire war zone. This bastard is bound to cause us a lot of trouble, and the allies are eyeing us. Our situation is very bad. Go and call for reinforcements. The more the better." "Yes, General." Pretty. Commander Yuri was annoyed, but in the command post of the Allied Forces base in the Holy City, General Li Wiki and the three generals cheered happily. They were targeted by more than a dozen laser UFOs, and they were able to escape on the mountainside. They were even able to fight back through guerrilla warfare. All laser UFOs. Ask yourself, they may not be able to do it in person, but they let Wang Ling complete it. This guy is truly worthy of being a heroic unit of the coalition, and he has truly lived up to his reputation. Sure enough, those laser UFOs can't do anything to Wang Ling. He has strong firepower, a flexible mind, and many clever ideas. However, he is not too arrogant and knows how to retreat to advance. This Wang Ling is really amazing. In the Allied command post, General Reagan's expression was not very good. However, after watching the electronic video for a while, he seemed to have become accustomed to Wang Ling's behavior and gradually looked away. This time, he was not so angry. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 627. Wang Ling, how are you now? After he was overjoyed, General Li Wiki quickly radioed the hero and expressed his condolences. And Wang Ling's answer was honest, "General, it's okay now. These laser UFOs wanted to harm me, but they still let me run away. When I attacked the mountainside base before, these laser UFOs wanted to harm me. The chance of success it should be bigger, but they waited until the entire mountainside base was destroyed before launching the attack, which shows that these Yuri commanders are not monolithic." General Li Wiki didn't find it strange. Don't we all have our own ideas when we unite with the Allies? Yuri created the Soul Empire, and these high-level generals don't know where they pieced it together. It's inevitable that there will be barriers, which is not surprising. 2. Now, only the Yuri base on the top of the mountain is left. Judging from the fact that they just sent laser UFOs to sneak attack on you, this base has obviously become self-conscious and has recognized your threat. Presumably a large number of reinforcements will be mobilized to assist in the defense. Moreover, they also occupy a favorable location, and it will be more difficult to capture them than to capture the base on the mountainside. Indeed, General, Commander Yuri of that base is not a fool. He cannot sit still and wait for death. But General, don't worry too much now. You can always find an opportunity to completely capture the Yuri base on the top of the mountain. That's right, all you need is this confidence. Okay, after the war and running around again, you are tired too, come back and rest. Yes, General. After the communication was interrupted, Wang Ling also breathed a sigh of relief, and then directly ordered the entire group of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles to rush back to the base as quickly as possible. It was exactly as General Li Wiki said. He had been preparing since early in the morning, running around and fighting, and then fighting and retreating. This lasted for so long that Wang Ling was tired. As for the other Rhino tanks, Phantom tanks, and even the Apocalypse tanks that were slowly following behind, Wang Ling only issued a general retreat order and did not take care of them alone. Yuri's base on the mountainside has been destroyed, and the base on the top of the mountain has not made any offensive moves for the time being. Now that it is close to the holy city's own territory, there is no need to worry about any trouble on the way. After returning to the base and getting off the car, Wang Ling stretched hard. After sitting in the car for so long, his back was a little sore. He led the team to directly conquer the Yuri base on the mountainside. This record was a brilliant one. It was spread within the base. Whether it was the Wolf Group or the Eagle Group, they all admired Wang Ling. Along the way, all the officers and soldiers who passed by paid military salutes on their own, with extremely respectful expressions. Even when they saw other squad leaders, after the military salute, they unhesitatingly flattered Wang Ling, and they kept laughing while talking. Even Chen Tong, the leader of the Eagle team, couldn't help but find Wang Ling again and humbly asked for advice on how to deal with Yuri's troops and Yuri's base. It can be said that wherever he goes, he is treated like a hero. Although it is a bit uncomfortable, it somewhat satisfies Wang Ling's vanity. This continuous rush and constant battles took a long time. After Wang Ling returned to the base, he was active not long before the sun began to fade away. At this time, the last batch of Apocalypse tanks of the attack team had also returned successfully. Those who returned to the team, those who went to the maintenance shop went to the maintenance shop. The entire base was operating in an orderly manner in the rest room. After dinner, we did some activities. When the time came, and after arranging the personnel on duty, Wang Ling returned to the temporary command post. After a brief chat with Li Tong and Gu Suanwu, he lay on the bed and returned to the real world. In the real world, this period is quite lively. The upcoming internship has also revitalized this dormant school, especially the sophomore year. Most of the students from abroad have returned, or have already returned to school. Some have started training or are preparing for training, and some are still waiting for news about internships. Of course, once the internship begins, without this group of people, the entire school will become more deserted. But at least it's still quite lively now. Early the next morning, Wang Ling got up with his injured friends, washed up, and went to have breakfast. There are usually fewer people in the restaurant during regular meals, but this time, with the addition of this group of students, it was much more lively. After breakfast, Wang Ling had nothing to do for the time being. After waiting for a while, he simply followed a few of them and went to the training classroom together, wanting to fish in troubled waters and see how they trained here. However, what Wang Ling didn't expect was that the trainer turned out to be Li Qiangwei. Because Wang Ling's performance during the interview was so personal, Li Qiangwei had obviously remembered Wang Ling. After the roll call, she glanced and spotted Wang Ling. In the school, it is inevitable that some students from other departments will occasionally skip classes or go to classrooms of other departments or majors because of some matters or interests, and the teachers will basically not care about them. But it didn't work here. Li Qiangwei actually kicked Wang Ling out directly. Good guy, Wang Ling enjoys hero-level treatment in the Red Alert world, but he is treated like this in the real world. In comparison, Wang Ling is a little bit dumbfounded. Of course, it wasn't just him. Outside the classroom, he could even hear the ridicule of the few harmful friends in the classroom. Since he couldn't fish in troubled waters, there was nothing he could do. Wang Ling spread his hands and didn't force anything. After wandering outside for a while, he simply returned to the dormitory to pet the dog. All the sophomore students who were going to participate in internships were already busy, but Wang Ling was very leisurely, as usual, looking very decadent. However, after all, there are things that are more difficult than others, so Wang Ling doesn't feel too bad about it. During lunch, several people gathered together again and continued class in the afternoon. They were released after a 3-hour class. The training period is naturally mixed with exams, and there are symbolic small exams every day. Finally, there is a large exam. Only after you pass it can you officially start the internship. Of course, since they are selected student interns after all, this standard will not be too strict. After returning to the dormitory at night, Zhang Shenke and Dongfang Yuking just threw their notebooks on the bed, doing what they were supposed to do. On the other hand, Wei Bowen and Sun Tongtong were really reviewing and memorizing in order to prepare for the exam. Although they are in this Pheasant University, in fact not all students are top students in high school. For example, Wei Bowen's college entrance examination scores have already hit the second line. However, I just got through, but I was not admitted, and I didn't want to take 3 courses. As a result, I ended up in this school by accident. As for Sun Tongtong, she was a top student in high school, but then she became decadent and failed the college entrance examination, so she finally ended up here. But after all, they have both been academic masters, and their attitude towards learning is quite different from those 2 pure academic scumbags. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 628. Really, I never took so many notes when I was in high school, and I haven't written so many words in 3 years. It's really troublesome to do an internship. Trouble is trouble, but it can be useful. Look at what is written down here. What is the origin of the company? Is it useful? My fingers are starting to hurt from the writing. Throwing away their notebooks and turning on their computers, Dongfang Yuking and Zhang Shenke started to complain. I think so. I have been a bad student for so long and I am used to it. Of course I am not used to it when I first start training. Wei Bowen didn't give any face, and directly said sarcastically, 2 scumbags. Sun Tongtong, on the other hand, was more normal and consoled her, this is the basis. It allows us to understand our internship unit and have a good idea. During the internship, this is actually not very important. The main thing is that we must not face tomorrow's inspection. Love so and so, I'm too lazy to remember it anyway, let's start a game first and then talk about it. As he was talking, the sound of starting up was heard from the computer. He connected to the internet, called Wang Ling, and soon the game was opened. Then, the scene in the dormitory suddenly changed. Middle of the road. Zoom in. Q. Chase. Beautiful. Tear down the towers. Dot. These 3 people were playing games online, and they were so unscrupulous that the sound of shouting caused Sun Tongtong to have a headache. Normally, she would have been more or less used to this sound, but who told her to review and recite it now? The 3 of them were yelling at each other while playing a game, which made her speechless. Wei Bowen was carefree, turning the page from time to time, shaking his head, and commented, 3 scumbags. But Wang Ling and the 3 of them ignored it at all and continued. After a few more minutes, they finally finished the round. At this time, Sun Tongtong and Wei Bowen were still reviewing. Sun Tongtong looked like that. She put on her eyes and rubbed her forehead from time to time, looking more seriously. But Wei Bowen had his legs crossed, humming and twisting his body, not to mention he looked very arrogant. In the end, Zhang Sheng couldn't stand it anymore, stood up and scolded, "You idiot, have you had enough of pretending? Come over and play games." Wei Bowen rolled his eyes at him, still looking like a bird. "I'm giving you face, aren't I?" Zhang Sheng was a little anxious. Snapped. Wei Bowen was even more anxious. With a wave of his hand, he threw the notebook against the wall, which shocked Sun Tongtong. Then he stood up and said angrily, "Try one more thing." "Ah, say one more thing, try it." "What are you talking about? You say one more thing, and I'll turn on the computer." Dot. Give it big, give it big. The dog sword master stole the tower. Come and support me, the monkey is chasing me. Dot. It was really a large-scale rollover scene. I had vowed to review before, but who would have thought that I would be so spineless? When Zhang Shenke yelled, I just threw away my laptop and turned on the computer. Listening to the sound of the four of them playing games, Sun Tong Tong felt helpless. She shook her head and sighed, really, four losers. Pretty. But the four of them were too immersed in it and never heard it at all. They even cheered very cooperatively, causing Sun Tong Tong to cry and laugh. When they started playing, they lost track of time. The four of them even licked their faces and asked Sun Tong Tong to buy some dinners for them. I got into bed and played with my phone. They will continue training tomorrow, otherwise they will never rest at this point. But Wang Ling no longer had such worries. After a day's rest in the real world, he suddenly entered the red alert world again and lay down on the bed in the temporary command post to rest. In today's red alert world, there is only one Yuri base left in the Holy City war zone. Facing threats from coalition forces and allied forces, it always appears to be somewhat weak. Moreover, with the guards on strict shift duty, and Li Tong and Gu Suanwu taking turns on duty, with the help of an unobstructed electronic map, the movements of Yuri base can be monitored at all times, and any abnormal behavior can be reported in advance, so Wang Ling slept in this red alert world, and now he no longer had to worry about enemy attacks. He could sleep peacefully until dawn. It seems that they have been stimulated by yesterday. This last Yuri base in the Holy City war zone has a sense of self-danger. Since Wang Ling and the others returned yesterday, they have been making small moves to expand the size of the base, add defensive buildings, and expand armored forces. Quantity: from time to time in the tank factory, you can see a tank vehicle leaving the factory, or a laser UFO appearing. Today, this expansion is still going on. Early in the morning, I saw 2 transport planes delivering 2 batches of infantry units. There were even reinforcements of infantry coming from outside the map. They were divided into 3 groups, each one. The total number of large units exceeds 300, which shows how vigilant this last Yuri base is. Seeing these 3 groups of Yuri infantry arriving, Wang Ling clicked his tongue and wanted to take an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle and go up there and kill them all. However, after all, this group of infantry was behind the hill and crossed the hill to attack. For the ground troops, the risk of being intercepted was too great, and Wang Ling would probably be targeted. If the Air Force is used, the development of armed helicopters has not yet been completed. The production and flight of Kirov airships are too slow to be considered, so we can only watch helplessly. However, Wang Ling lost his mind, but the allies were different. Just as Wang Ling shook his head and gave up, a SEAL got into the multifunctional infantry vehicle in the allied base and quickly drove out of the base. Holy shit, no way, you're so aggressive, Wang Ling was a little surprised. Putting the SEALs into a multi-purpose infantry vehicle, the infantry vehicle also has the firepower of the SEALs, and the weapon is transformed into a submachine gun to instantly kill the infantry. It is an idea to use this combination to attack the reinforcements at Yuri base, but when it comes to is it so easy to block reinforcements from behind enemy lines? With this question in mind, Wang Ling stared at the electronic video. Under his gaze, the multifunctional infantry vehicle quickly passed through the Holy City, crossed the suburbs, broke into the hilly area, quickly detoured, and passed the Yuri base on the top of the mountain. Not long after speeding, it collided head-on with the first. He criticized the reinforcements from Yuri's troops and opened fire directly. Chug tug tug. Chug tug tug. The SEALs themselves have the ability to kill infantry, and after the multifunctional infantry vehicle has this ability, it is naturally more sharp. Under the firepower of this infantry vehicle, the front row of soldiers fell down in rows. In a few breaths, more than a dozen orcs and more than 20 Yuri recruits died in the battle. Killing so many infantrymen in one breath, this multifunctional infantry vehicle quickly accumulated experience in the service, and was promoted to the 3-star elite level in one jump, with even greater firepower than before. According to this posture, it is certainly not a problem to destroy these reinforcements. But the problem is that among these reinforcements, there are not all natural enemies of infantry vehicles. Buzz. Just as the multifunctional infantry vehicle was wreaking havoc, there was a sudden buzz in the infantry team. It turned out to be a member of the psychic force who took action. A red line was cast, and the menacing multifunctional infantry vehicle was controlled in an instant. Transformed into a subordinate unit of Yuri base. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 629. Mind Control Again. The reason why Yuri's base and troops are difficult to deal with can be said to be a large part of the reason why they are so unpredictable and troublesome. If there is no mind control ability, then relying on the powerful firepower of the coalition's Apocalypse tanks can completely sweep all Yuri troops and even Yuri bases. For example, in the current situation, the Allied SEALs stationed a multifunctional infantry vehicle. After changing the weapons and attack methods of the infantry vehicle, it became the natural enemy of almost all infantry. Any Yuri infantry that broke in within the range could be instantly killed. Killed instantly by it, a SEAL plus a multi-purpose infantry vehicle is enough to wipe out all the Yuri infantry. But the Yuri infantry who came to the rescue were also mixed with psychic troops. After getting close, they directly used their psychic control abilities. The originally unscrupulous multifunctional infantry vehicle overturned on the spot. This is even more annoying than being directly blown up, because the troops under control have directly betrayed their position, transforming from the original Allied forces into Yuri troops and serving Yuri base. When the Allies send a large infantry force to attack, this multifunctional infantry vehicle suddenly appears and kills all the infantry. You can imagine how disgusted the Allies will be. And it seems that they have seen the value of this multifunctional infantry vehicle, and Yuri's troops also attach great importance to it. After controlling it, the multifunctional infantry vehicle turned around and ran away, and drove for a period of time, passing through the winding mountain road. Drove all the way into the Yuri base on the top of the mountain, and stopped between two tank bunkers. It was obvious that he had made plans to use it to trap and kill the coalition forces and Allied infantry. Not far in front of it is the troop recycling station of Yuri base, but Yuri base on the top of the mountain is obviously not in urgent need of combat funds, so it is not sent to the recycling station. Tisk, tisk. After seeing the scene in the electronic video, Wang Ling did not find it strange at all, and even complained that the Allies sent such an infantry killer to Yuri's troops. If they want to attack Yuri's base in the future, this thing is a big threat. As for the attitude of the Allies, Wang Ling didn't know and didn't bother to know. Apart from these, there were no other changes in the Holy City war zone for the time being, and Wang Ling simply moved the scope of the electronic map to other war zones. The two armies unite to fight against the Empire of Mind. Of course, this electronic satellite signal is communicated throughout the war zone. If you want to check it, you can check it at any time as long as you have permission. From Wang Ling's inspection, it can be found that in other war zones, anyone who discovered Yuri's base has already come into conflict to varying degrees. The attack of Yuri's troops, especially the joint attack of multiple arms by armored troops, is quite tricky. Coupled with the random intrusion of laser UFOs, many bases during the game were unable to withstand such coordinated attacks and were defeated one by one. Fortunately, Wang Ling had already summarized all the Yuri troops in detail at the joint meeting before, and informed them of the functions and response methods of these troops. Under the impact of these Yuri troops, although all the fronts showed chaos, but overall, no base has been captured so far. However, losses to varying degrees are inevitable. While Wang Ling was observing, there happened to be a coalition base on the theater front that was being attacked by Yuri's armored forces. This batch of Yuri armored units is also quite luxurious in terms of lineup. Tornado tanks and jet tanks are the main attackers, followed by mind control vehicles and magneto-electric tanks at the rear. They cooperate with each other and are very sharp. Today, this group of Yuri armored forces has conquered the base entrance area of the defense line, and more than a dozen tornado tanks and 6 jet tanks drove straight in. However, they ran into the coalition guards inside the base. There were 2 battle bunkers nearby and set fire. They tried their best to block the entry of these tanks and gradually began to fight back. However, during the counterattack, the mind control vehicles from the rear broke through, and a group of counter-attacking coalition guards were controlled one after another. Behind them, the magneto-electric tanks were even remotely dismantling the battle bunker. During this process, the coalition combat bunker was also constantly counter-attacking, taking the lead in setting fire to the mind control vehicle, and not far away there were several phantom tanks cooperating with the sneak attack. However, the controlled coalition guards became a serious problem at this time. They actually cooperated with Yuri's troops to counter-attack the coalition forces, quickly dismantled the 2 battle bunkers, and then began to attack other buildings. Of course, there are a large number of coalition guards, and the limit of 1 mind control vehicle is only 3 enemy units. However, these 4 mind control vehicles are greedy and control a large number of coalition guards. They are seriously overloaded and their own health is reduced in rapid decline. During this process, seemingly with the intention of letting the rebel forces use their remaining energy, the controlled coalition guards launched a frenzied attack without fear of death, causing huge damage to the coalition base in a short period of time. The battle bunker, 2 magnetic storm coils, 3 sentry guns, and a group of infantry tanks were all damaged. Boom. Boom boom boom. However, after being reckless for so long, the 4 mind-controlled vehicles endured overloaded damage and sneak attacks from phantom tanks. They lost their health one after another and exploded with a roar. With the explosion of the mind control vehicle, the confidence of these Yuri offensive troops immediately weakened. The coalition troops that had been controlled and fought back frantically also regained their clarity in an instant. Knowing that they had been controlled before and had done those stupid things, this group of soldiers and tanks seemed to be crazy now, and they desperately began to block the tornado tanks and getter tanks of Yuri's troops. The reason why Yuri's armored forces are tough is that they rely on the mind control vehicles. Now that the mind control vehicles are gone, with a burst of rumbling cannons, all the tornado tanks and getter tanks were wiped out, even those who attacked remotely from behind. The magneto-electric tank had no support and was quickly bombed by the coalition forces. A guard battle ended here. More than 10 defensive buildings of various types were lost, and all infantry tanks suffered dozens of casualties. The periphery of the base was full of debris left by the war. This battle was brutal. However, when there is war, there are sacrifices. There are no heroic units like Wang Ling in these bases. There will often be similar large-scale losses. Although it is heartbreaking every time, the corresponding commanders are more or less they have all adapted. After the war, various types of engineers quickly got busy, repairing damaged buildings, rebuilding, and even expanding various defensive buildings, while other infantry tanks also recovered from their injuries and then continued to take turns guarding. In fact, during this period of time, similar battles would appear in various theater bases from time to time. Not only the coalition forces, but also the Allied forces would suffer similar attacks, often with heavy losses. Each theater base was dotted with battle stations. The pits and smoke left behind looked particularly ferocious. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 630. Call. After witnessing such a tragic battle with his own eyes, Wang Ling let out a sigh of relief and felt a little sad in his heart. Although he had seen too many such brutal battles and even defeats during the game. But although this is a game world, it is different from the game after all. All the soldiers seem to be living in an alternative form. Any of our own troops who have interacted with Wang Ling can use the advanced exchange of the system to exchange them. It is vividly summoned to the real world, just like Xiao He, who has been retiring in the dormitory now. For all these reasons, it was really difficult for Wang Ling to regard these soldiers as pure procedures. In his heart, these people were all his comrades. Looking at the large-scale sacrifice of these comrades, he felt somewhat uncomfortable. However, there is really no other way. Who made this a red alert world? How can the eggs be intact when the nest is overturned? Since there is a war, sacrifice is inevitable. Thinking of this, Wang Ling looked away a little, and then continued to check the electronic video. What we watched before was the attack of Yuri's troops, but since it was a war, it was impossible to defend all the time. The coalition and allied forces would also launch counterattacks from time to time. After watching for a while and switching to several war zones in succession, Wang Ling discovered about 15 uniformly colored light tanks in the Eastern Plains war zone and gradually approached the nearest Yuri base. There were 15 light prism tanks. With such a lineup, even Wang Ling would have a hard time dealing with it and had to resort to strategy. But now, these 15 light tanks have gathered together to attack Yuri's base, and they don't know the outcome. Thinking of this, Wang Ling became very curious and watched the battle with concentration. Under his attention, these 15 light prism tanks assembled outside Yuri's base, and then acted in unison and rushed towards Yuri's base. The prism tank has great advantages against Yuri base. Its ultra-long range is enough to restrain most of the buildings and troops in Yuri base. As long as it is commanded properly, it is very likely to destroy an entire building if nothing unexpected happens. From Yuri's base. Swish swish swish. Boom. 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 As expected, this group of light prism tanks should have real-time command from the corresponding commander. They parked outside Yuri's base and opened fire forcefully from a long distance away. The damage caused by the light prism rays to the building is very considerable. 15 light prism rays were fired at the same time, and the getter cannon in front was exploded instantly. Then, 2 mind control towers exploded one after another, and then, under a concentrated fire, another getter cannon exploded. These 4 salvos have already eliminated the obstacles blocking the entrance to Yuri's base. It can be said that the attack was very clean and neat. After taking out these 4 obstacles, the 15 light prism tanks began to advance slowly again. Swish swish swish. Swish swish swish. After advancing for a certain distance, the buildings of Yuri's base were touched within the fire range, and the concentrated fire bombardment immediately began. In an instant, a tank bunker was destroyed, exposing the Gustard tank inside. After the Gustav tank appeared, it shook its barrel and wanted to rush over and fight with the group of prism tanks. However, just as it turned its body, before it had time to move, those light prism tanks fired light prism rays at it again. A major feature of this prism ray is that when it bombards infantry tanks, it will connect on its own, causing connection damage to nearby troops and buildings. As a result, using the tornado tank as a medium, more than 10 light prism rays were scattered and connected together. In an instant, they exploded 2 nearby radiation reactors and disabled a getter cannon. Naturally, the tornado tank was even more. There was no way to survive and it exploded instantly. And this series of bombardments finally angered the Yuri base. Before the light tanks could act recklessly, a large-scale force took action in the Yuri base. Dozens of Yuri recruits, wild orcs and the psychic troops rushed in from different directions, and more than a dozen tornado tanks and nearly 10 get tanks also came over. This kind of lineup is a big threat to the light prism tank group. Fortunately, the commander who commanded in real time also knew the importance and did not attack the buildings of Yuri's base. Instead, this group of light prism tanks took the lead in killing all the buildings. Encirclement and suppression troops. Swish swish swish. Swish swish swish. Next, it became lively. 15 light prism tanks fired at Yuri's troops in the fan-shaped area in front. The scattered light prism rays were combined into various patterns, revealing magnificence and tragedy. Shooting, coupled with continuous bombardment, the number of approaching infantry was instantly reduced by half. 2 Get tanks also exploded, and a tornado tank was also exploded. The health of the others was also affected to varying degrees. Swish, swish, swish. However, that's not all. As long as the light prism tank is not killed, similar attacks will be endless. Then the second and third rounds of light prism rays also followed, and all Yuri's infantry who came were wiped out, and the tanks the team has also been reduced by half. Even with the help of this messy and irregular connection, a large number of buildings in Yuri's base were implicated and exploded, exposing some tanks, which rushed over together with the remaining Gust tanks. These remaining tanks were already relatively close to the group of light prism tanks. As a result, they withstood the bombardment of light prism rays and forced their way over to fire. At the cost of total annihilation, they finally killed 2 light prism tanks. However, the loss of these 2 tanks did not have much impact on the overall light prism tank group. After killing these encirclement and suppression troops, the remaining light prism tanks began to be dismantled again. Afterwards, 2 groups of Yuri troops rushed in one after another. However, under real-time command, only 1 light tank was blown up, and all these encirclement and suppression troops were wiped out. Swish swish swish. Swish swish swish. After breaking through several counter-encirclement and suppression campaigns, the remaining light prism tanks became even more unscrupulous, firing out light prism rays, leaving the Yuri base riddled with holes. However, the battle has continued until now, and the prism tank has gradually become dangerous. In Yuri's base, above the tank factory, a laser UFO actually flew out at this time. When attacking this time, all the prism tanks are powerful, but a single unit will always have flaws. For example, now, without the air defense troops to follow, that laser UFO has become their formidable enemy. Sure enough, after the laser UFO left the factory, it flew directly above the group of prism tanks and began to fight back. Of course, if there is only one laser UFO, it will still take some time to completely destroy these light tanks. However, as time went by, 3 more slave mines suddenly appeared in the mines inside Yuri's base. They happened to have finished digging the mineral deposits and wanted to move to another location. However, their route happened to be blocked by a group of light tanks. Blocked. In addition, behind Yuri's base, the 2 mind-controlled vehicles in the collection also began to move out, and 2 other magneto-electric tanks also slowly began to move, all rushing towards the light tank. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 631. It's over now. After seeing this in the electronic video, Wang Ling clicked his tongue and shook his head. Although those types of troops had not yet approached the light tank, Wang Ling already knew the result. Whether it is the 3 slave mines or the 2 mind control vehicles, the armor is very hard. Even if the light tank focuses its fire, it will take some time to deal with one of the types of troops. But now, these 2 types of arms are heading towards the group of light tanks, which is simply difficult to deal with. What's more, there are even more sinister magneto-electric tanks in the rear, and a laser UFO is constantly shooting in the sky. If we continue to attack in this round, there will be absolutely no chance of death, and not even a single light tank will be left. Of course, if we temporarily retreat at this time and send air defense troops to destroy the pursuing laser UFOs, this batch of light prism tanks can still be retained for the next batch. After all, they have been attacking for so long now, and it is enough to beat this Yuri base to a pulp. However, the commanders behind these light tanks obviously had no intention of retreating and wanted to continue the attack. After the 3 slave mines entered the shooting range, more than a dozen light prism tanks directly concentrated fire and bombarded them. Of these more than 10 light prism tanks, After such a long attack, 3 have been promoted to the elite level, with more powerful firepower. If they were other tanks, they would explode under such concentrated fire bombardment. However, the slave mine is extremely hard. One round of concentrated fire only destroyed about 1/3 of the health of the front slave mine, and connected to the 2 slave mines at the rear. The health of the slave mine was depleted. Less, but the surrounding slaves who didn't have time to get on the train were hit and were directly bombarded to death. Swish, swish, swish. After one round failed, there was another round. The second round of focused fire shooting by a group of prism tanks was led by 3 elite vehicles, and then came the third round. Boom! After 3 consecutive rounds of focused fire bombardment, the slave mine car at the head finally exploded. However, during the bombardment, the remaining 2 slave mines were already approaching. When a group of light tanks once again changed their targets and focused their fire, they also began to use machine guns to fight back. The machine gun in the slave mine has limited destructive power, but who makes the light tank itself fragile? Under the concentrated fire of 2 machine guns, a light tank was finally killed at the expense of a slave mine explosion. During this period, the laser UFO in the sky was also firing continuously, destroying 2 light prism tanks one after another. There is no way to defend against air power. Looking at ground targets alone, if there is only the last slave mine left, then no matter what, but at this time, 2 mind control vehicles have also arrived nearby, and 2 magneto-electric tanks have arrived. From a distance, they began to attract a light prism tank. There was a lot of anti-aircraft firepower in Yuri's base. As soon as the 2 prism tanks floated into the air defense firepower circle, all the remaining anti-aircraft firepower of the base opened fire, destroying them within a moment. After killing 2 light prism tanks, the magneto-electric tank still did not give up and immediately attracted 2 more tanks. During this period, the mind control vehicles also rushed in front of the remaining light prism tanks and began to exert mind control. The remaining light prism tanks almost became the targets of their competition, and they were all controlled almost in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the last 2 prism tanks were also blown up by air defense forces. A sharp siege battle ended here. The Allies lost a total of 15 prism tanks, and the Yuri base was severely beaten. A large number of buildings inside exploded, and many defenders were killed. The situation was quite tragic. This battle did not have much impact on the attacking Allies as a whole. They just lost a number of prism tanks and were busy as they should. However, Yuri's base is filled with the debris of the war, and the subsequent reconstruction and defense tasks will be huge. As for the prisoners of war, most of the light tanks stayed in the base to assist in the defense, but one was sent out alone. It seemed that it was an Allied base that wanted to attack Niwai. However, the commander of the Allied base was decisive. He cut off his wrists and sent an invader fighter plane to blow up the prism tank when it was halfway through the journey. At this point, the battle in the Eastern Plains theater finally came to an end. After Wang Ling read it, he shook his head and sighed for a while. After casually watching the battles in a few war zones, he switched the electronic map to the Holy City war zone. He found no other movements in Yuri base on the top of the mountain, and then he felt relieved. Compared with the battle situation in other war zones, the results here in the Holy City war zone are very brilliant. 2 of the Yuri bases that were originally 3 pillars have been completely eliminated. Although they belong to the same camp, this record is enough to make them proud. The coalition forces are like this, and so are the Allies. Although General Reagan still dislikes the coalition forces, with this record in front of him, he has to be grateful that there is a pervert like Wang Ling among the coalition forces he cooperates with. Of course, the last Yuri base must be destroyed, but after all, it is a Yuri base, and it is also a strong enemy with geographical advantages and comprehensive defense. The final general attack cannot be launched casually. Wang Ling needed to rest, and the base's technology also needed to improve. During this period, it was inevitable that there would be a stalemate to some extent. When there was no fighting, Wang Ling was quite leisurely. He walked around and took a look around. It was already evening and he returned to the real world comfortably. In this real world, internship training has begun, and at least for this week, life is relatively stable. This day was generally no different from yesterday. Those bad friends gradually got used to the rhythm of training. When they returned to the dormitory that night, except for Sun Tongtong who was still reviewing, even Wei Bowen gave up and put his notebook against the wall. Take the last breath, turn on the computer directly, and cherish this last time to indulge. It wasn't until 12 o'clock in the night, after these bad friends lay down, that Wang Ling finished washing and returned to the Red Alert world again. In the world of Red Alert, the stalemate stage between the two sides is not particularly unusual. But on this day, the Allied forces gave Wang Ling a surprise. When Wang Ling was bored, a group of Allied engineers quickly built a new main building. As a player, Wang Ling certainly recognizes this new type of building. Isn't it the control center? What is the control center used for? Specialized in remote control of a new type of Allied tanks, remote control tanks. Now that the control center has been successfully developed and built, does that mean that the remote controlled tank has also been launched? Sure enough, not long after Wang Ling had expected it, a weird tank really came out of the Allied tank factory. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 632. This kind of weird tank looks like a large, weird-looking locust on the whole. The upper body is equipped with small-caliber double barrels, and the chassis has 3 legs, but it is only used to maintain balance. In fact, this type of tank does not touch the ground, but distance. Floating at a certain distance from the ground. Seeing this appearance, Wang Ling recognized it at a glance. Isn't this a remote-controlled tank? At the original joint meeting, Wang Ling proposed the design concept of a remote-controlled tank to the Allies based on the game settings. Unsurprisingly, the Allies adopted it decisively. After developing it for so long, it finally came out and was used by the Allies. Production began at the military base. This kind of remote control tank is very practical, especially against Yuri's troops. First of all, as the name suggests, the remote control tank is controlled by manual remote control with the help of a control center. It only needs electricity to drive. Therefore, it is mindless and will not be affected by mind control at all. It is the natural enemy of mind control vehicles and can also be restrained. The mind control tower in Yuri's base. It can be said that this remote-controlled tank was specially developed to deal with Yuri's mind empire. In addition, the cost of building this remote-controlled tank is also very low, which is the same as the cost of a multifunctional infantry vehicle. It is also very fast in terms of movement speed. Although it is not as good as anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and multi-purpose infantry vehicles, it is faster than Grizzly tanks, Rhino tanks, and Tornado tanks. As for the attack power, the remote control tank is similar to the Grizzly tank, but not as powerful as the Rhino tank, but its rate of fire is faster than that of the Rhino tank, and its range is slightly longer than that of the Rhino tank. A group of remote-controlled tanks can besiege minecarts and other tanks, and even dismantle the mind control tower, and the effect is very good. In addition, the remote control tank is suspended after all, so it can naturally move forward on the sea. The rivers and oceans that other land units need to circumvent, this remote control tank can walk on flat ground. Of course, although it is said to be floating forward, it is actually not too high from the ground, and the ground is hard enough and the power is sufficient, and it can also roll over ordinary infantry. Of course, no matter in the game or in the Red Alert world, there are no perfect units, and remote-controlled tanks are no exception. This remote-controlled tank requires power supply and a command center to control it. Once the power is cut off or something happens to the command center, the remote-controlled tank will be useless. It will fall directly from the suspended state and become a living target. It may even fall into the sea when advancing, falling directly into the ocean. In addition, remote-control tanks do not have any air defense capabilities, and any air force can easily destroy them. Then there is the armor and health. The armor and health of remote-controlled tanks are indeed higher than those of armored units such as anti-aircraft crawlers, multi-purpose infantry vehicles or light tanks, but they are only higher. At best, it has medium health and armor. Compared with main battle tanks such as the Grizzly tank and Rhino tank, it can be said that it is very weak against beatings and cannot be used for attacking difficulties. Of course, there are no absolutes. When there are too many ants, they can kill elephants. They are so anxious that they directly make hundreds or even hundreds of remote-controlled tanks. They are densely packed. If they attack by force, Yuri's base cannot stop them. Crazy offense. Summarizing these advantages and disadvantages, it can be seen that the practicality of remote-controlled tanks is quite high. General Reagan had previously used a remote-controlled tank to challenge General Lewicki and was very proud of himself, which shows how optimistic he is about remote-controlled tanks. After obtaining the production technology, the Allies produced 7 remote-controlled tanks that day. After gathering them, they drove out of the base and rushed straight to Yuri's base on the top of the mountain. Isn't it a bit tigerish? Wang Ling was dumbfounded when he saw this scene. Do you want to attack Yuri's base with 7 remote-controlled tanks? Is this because he looks down on Yuri's base, or is he too confident in the remote-control tank? After thinking about it, Wang Ling figured out that this remote-controlled tank had just been developed after all, and the Allies were not very familiar with its use and positioning. After all, there was no player like Wang Ling in their forces. After several consecutive experimental uses, it is time to explore the combat method suitable for remote-control tanks. Thinking of this, Wang Ling put away all his sarcasm and watched as the remote-control tank left the holy city, entered the hilly area, and roared straight to the top of the mountain, storming the mind control tower at the intersection. The Allies were not stupid. They knew that remote-controlled tanks were specifically designed to deal with mind control. They also knew that the mind control tower was too threatening to other troops, so they experimented with the mind control tower. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. The sound of the remote-controlled tank firing had some electromagnetic beating sounds, but overall it was still the shells of conventional tanks. 7 of them worked together to attack the mind control tower, and the damage was quite considerable. However, the mind control tower cannot counterattack the magneto-electric tank, but the getter cannon can. When these 7 remote-controlled tanks worked together to bombard the mind control tower, the 2 getter cannons also deployed at the intersection fought back. They fired continuously for a period of time. The firepower changed from first gear to second gear, and then from second gear to second gear. In the highest level of third gear, the ta-da-da sound was loud, and the machine gun muzzle seemed to burst into flames. It didn't take long before 2 remote-controlled tanks were destroyed. At this time, the remaining 5 remote-controlled tanks had already destroyed the target mind control tower, and then focused their fire on one of the getter cannons. This getter cannon is stronger than the mind control tower. After the 2 sides fought head-on for a period of time, all 5 remote-controlled tanks exploded, but the getter cannon was only knocked out of half of its health, and was quickly repaired under the operation of the engineering troops. Middle. This remote-controlled tank had just come out, and 7 of them were built to attack. In the end, they were completely destroyed without even being able to blow up several defensive buildings at the entrance to Yuri's base. This record is somewhat dismal. However, after all, they did not have much idea about the positioning of remote-controlled tanks, and the Allies were conducting tests accordingly. Although General Reagan was slightly disappointed, he was not depressed. He even continued to order the tank factory to continue manufacturing remote-controlled tanks. If it weren't for the presence of cheating players like Wang Ling, after the emergence of a new type of arms in the Red Alert world, it would take some time for commanders to get used to it. Wang Ling was no longer paying too much attention to the details of the remote-controlled tanks at the back. After observing the general situation on the electronic map, Wang Ling stretched out and continued with what he was doing. General Li Wiki didn't know what he was waiting for. Now Wang Ling was ready to attack Yuri base again, but the combat meeting has not been held yet. There simply weren't any extra moves in this Yuri base, so Wang Ling was happy to rest for a while. During the break, the time soon came to night again, and Wang Ling also took the trouble to shuttle between the two worlds and return to the real world. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 633. At this stage of life, it can be said that it has become relatively stable. In the real world, it is already the third day of internship training. Those injured friends have completely adapted to these training contents. Naturally, daily complaints are inevitable. After these few days, Wang Ling also adapted to this kind of life. After the internship training is over, these bad friends will leave for the capital. Wang Ling also cherishes this short time together and spends time with them every night. They stayed up late, waiting until they lay down separately before entering the world of Red Alert again. In the world of Red Alert, everything is business as usual. The Yuri base on the top of the mountain seems to be in serious danger. It is constantly consolidating its defense power and rarely launches any decent large-scale attacks. Some ordinary troops occasionally dispatched will also attack after entering the Holy City area. Quickly eliminated by coalition and allied forces. The allies have been testing remote-controlled tanks in the past few days. They have stormed Yuri's base several times, bombarded the mind control tower and getter cannon, and even forced their way into the base despite the getter cannon bombardment. Pass through the interior of Yuri's base and destroy it randomly. However, the results were not ideal. Each group of 7 vehicles failed to cause much trouble to Yuri's base. Especially when breaking into Yuri's base, the damage from the gate cannon continues to increase, but the tornado tank's shells can kill a remote-controlled tank with no more than 3 rounds at most, and the orcs are one of the remote-controlled tanks. Big nemesis, you can kill one with just a few punches. After several successive trials, the allies gradually learned the lesson. They no longer stormed Yuri base, but instead harassed them, specifically focusing on the armored units leaving Yuri base, and even the slave mines. Such a change has a miraculous effect. The Yuri armored troops harassed by it are often miserable, and the Yuri slave mine is even more unlucky. After being targeted, there is often no way to survive. Even if there are armored troops defending, they can't survive. Unable to withstand the continuous harassment and attacks from remote-controlled tanks. As a result, after being harassed by remote-controlled tanks for a period of time, Yuri's troops were very annoyed. It seemed that they had figured out the characteristics and nemesis of remote-controlled tanks in previous battles. When going out or patrolling nearby, they specially added the strong wind. The number of tanks, and even each team of guards is specially equipped with a few wild orcs. Around every nearby mine, there are also traces of wild orcs in Yuri's troops guarding, just to prevent sneak attacks by remote-controlled tanks. In this way, this arrogant remote-controlled tank was really curbed, and the efficiency of sneak attacks was greatly reduced. As a result, the Allies also lost some enthusiasm for remote-controlled tanks, and the production frequency was not as high as before. Anyway, there were already the positioning of the remote control tank. As for the coalition forces, they have been recuperating their strength in the past few days. They only mobilize their defenses every day and monitor the movements of Yuri base in real time. Other than that, they have not taken any other actions. After several days of training, some officers and soldiers in the base became confused. In the current 2-on-1 situation, which is obviously powerful for our own side, why is the general still so calm and has not launched an attack? However, Wang Ling was sensitive to something. General Li Wiki was more waiting than asking the troops to recharge their batteries. As for what news he was waiting for, Wang Ling also had a few guesses, but he was not sure, and he did not ask alone. The past few days passed like this. In the real world, after several days, those bad friends also completed the basic content assessment and began to formally contact the professional training of agents. It is said to be professional training, but to put it bluntly, it is just basic knowledge and related skills. Wang Ling was originally not interested in this, but those bad friends were so troublesome that it was difficult for Wang Ling not to know. That night, after a day of training, they returned to the dormitory. It was rare that these people did not turn on the computer immediately. It seemed that they were deliberately showing off. Wei Bowen and Dong Fangyuking actually acted as seats in front of Wang Ling. Just act as a customer and just practice it. Hello, is this Mr. Dong? It's Dong Fang. Dong Fang is a compound surname. Do you understand? Do you have any culture? Hello Mr. Dong Fang, please don't worry about these details. Who are you? Hello Mr. Dong Fang, this is the XX Bank Credit Card Center. I am the agent and my job number is 54188. I'm your dad. What's wrong with you, a customer service guy, who curses people when you open your mouth? Mr. Dong Fang, please don't get me wrong. 54,188 is my job number. It doesn't have any special meaning. If I say 54,188, it means I am your father. Of course, if you think so, I will have no objection. Get out. I'm your grandpa. 54,188, right? I've remembered your job number, and now I'm going to call you to complain and scold my customers. Damn it, I've given you face, haven't you? You dare to complain to me? Do you believe that I will find a group of people to deal with you now? Is your customer service fake? The conversation between customer service and customers should have been quite serious, but who caught up with these two dishonest people? It was a short conversation, but it turned out to be very bad. From the beginning, they were bickering and finding fault. It was like a large-scale overturn scene. The originally serious customer service actually used foul language and started to fight like a little hooligan. It was obvious. Wang Ling laughed out loud. From their explanations, Wang Ling also learned that their internship unit was responsible for the credit card installment business. Wang Ling had no experience with this business, so he didn't make much judgment. And this so-called practice was actually just a few minutes of excitement. After the quarrel, these people started to have fun again. As before, they played until late at night. After the others lay down and snoring gradually began to sound, Wang Ling also returned to the red alert world and continued his life in another world for this day. In the past few days, the Holy City war zone had been almost peaceful. That is to say, the Allied remote-controlled tanks frequently made their presence felt and launched attacks and harassment from time to time. However, for both parties, the loss of this local friction is completely within the acceptable range. But today, it seems that there is no target to continue testing. The coalition forces are still recuperating and the Yuri base is still consolidating its defense. However, the Allies have already assembled a large force and want to launch a large-scale attack. Of course, after all, he had the experience of several attacks and Wang Ling's initial explanation. The attack organized by General Reagan was not just greedy for more. Instead, it used 8 Prism tanks as the main attack and 6 Phantoms. The tanks were guarded by 10 Grizzly tanks and 7 remote-controlled tanks. 10 anti-aircraft crawlers were responsible for air defense. There were also more than 20 rocket pilots, 5 terror robots, and even several allied soldiers and SEALs. And the Super Dimension Legion soldiers, the lineup can be described as luxurious.